Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Splash City Basketball Podcast. I am in the middle of our conference previews as we look at the start of college basketball on November 3rd. Today's episode is on the Big East Conference. This looks to be a two-horse race. Usually we're 5-6 teams from this conference in the big dance, March Madness. So we'll talk about some storylines, who are those top teams, who are those contenders, and then as usual I will pick my dark horse in the 3 and D. Thanks for listening. This is the Splash City Basketball Podcast. The Big East is one of my favorite leagues in college basketball. I love the history. I love the East Coast physical guards. I love some of the rivalries. I really, grew up on the Syracuse being in this league and Boston College being in this league as well. But Creighton's been a great addition. Xavier's been a great addition. So just looking at the coaches poll, so I'll reference this a lot in the podcast today. St. John's number 1, got 3 votes higher than UConn. UConn comes in at number 2. Then followed by Creighton, Providence, Marquette, Georgetown, Villanova with a new coach, Xavier with a new coach, DePaul, Butler, and Seton Hall round out the 11-team Big East Conference. So storyline 1, it's a two-horse race for the top of the league. It's pretty much a consensus that St. John's is going to defend its title against UConn. It'll be one of those two teams. They're both ranked in the top 10 preseason. Connecticut actually has a higher KenPom rank right now and then St. John's is ranked higher in Torvik. So these two are 1A and 1B. Two great coaches, Rick Pitino, Dan Hurley, both multi-national championship winners. When they go together, it's really fun basketball. It's really fun environments. Play them in the Garden, play them in Storrs, Connecticut. Doesn't matter. It's going to be exciting. So first, let's talk about St. John's. They are the defending Big East champion. They won their first Big East title in 25 years. Rick Pitino's team, per usual, is built on defense. They get after you. They make life difficult. They hustle. They get all the little plays. Make all the get all the rebounds. They are just feisty, I guess is the word that comes to mind about Rick Pitino's teams. But they're also loaded with talent. This year they return forward Zuby Ejiofor, who's the unanimous Big East preseason player of the year. They lost last year's top player, R.J. Lewis, but Ian Jackson comes in to bolster their backcourt. He's a transfer from North Carolina and actually was second on the Tar Heels in scoring, shooting 39.5% from 3. One big key for St. John's is that they got transfer from Bryce Hopkins, former All Big East first teamer at Providence, so another interconference transfer. If he can stay healthy, he's had issues. He's only played 17 games over the last 2 years. If he can stay healthy, St. John's, they're going to be good regardless. But I think Hopkins is kind of the key for them this year. If he's healthy, and he's the Bryce Hopkins from a couple of years ago, St. John's is definitely a national title contender. They're going to be in the Big East title race regardless. So looking at UConn, they won back-to-back titles a couple of years ago. That last year, I would say a little bit of a down year. I think Dan Hurley even said a little bit of a down year. They were an 8 seed. They actually gave Florida a great game in round 2, almost knocked them off, and as we know, Florida ended up winning the national title. So UConn, they always show up. Dan Hurley will have his team ready. They're reloaded. They got a couple guys returning that are key. Sharpshooter Solo Ball and do everything forward Alex Caravan. Caravan was on their title teams, and those two are going to really provide, I think, some stability for UConn to integrate some of the new players they got. One thing that Dan Hurley's teams like to have is a big point guard. So he went out and got 6'5" guard transferring from Georgia, Silas Demery Jr., and he's going to give them that like Tristan Newton type of point guard, big, long, defends the point of attack. He is going to really change, I think, the dynamics a little bit. And Hurley, UConn is a blue blood program, so Hurley went out and he's got some high end recruits coming in. So I will just say, like, if you watch a UConn game, watch what they run on offense. Dan Hurley is one of the most creative. They run some of the most sophisticated offensive schemes you'll see in college basketball. I just love the action they get. I love their misdirections. I love the way they, where they set their screens. And it's something in college basketball and in basketball in general that you don't see a ton of anymore. It's just that style of play where you're moving the ball, you're working off the ball, away from the ball, setting screens to get guys open. So really fun watch. This matchup is great. Pitino, Hurley, big personalities. It's East Coast. So it'll be a fun race to watch this year in the Big East. All right, storyline number 2. Let's talk about tournament contenders. Who are those other teams that are maybe not quite at the St. John's, Connecticut level, but likely to be in the tournament? We have to start with Creighton. Greg McDermott, has absolutely been on a tear, and a big part of that has been Ryan Kalkbrenner, who is no longer there. He was an inside stalwart scorer. He was 4-time Big East Defensive Player of the Year, gone to the NBA, doing a nice job for the Hornets right now. So no rim protector there anymore. They bring in Owen Freeman from Iowa. They bring in Josh Dix from Iowa. Owen Freeman, big body, good scorer, good footwork down low, can finish around the hoop, not a rim protector. And they also brought in Nick Graves at point guard to help replace Stephen Ashworth, who is gone as well. I did take note that Creighton is 2-0 in exhibition games. They beat Iowa State, who I'm very high on, and they also beat Colorado State. So it doesn't look like Creighton's going to take any major steps back, but they have been a very good program, and Greg McDermott's looking to pass the torch. They've already got their succession plans in for the next coach, but for right now, it's Greg McDermott's team. Local Minnesota and Twin Cities folks will recognize the name Jackson McAndrew. He's a 6'9" forward out of Wayzata. Started last season actually as a true freshman. It was used primarily as a shooter, floor spacers for Kalkbrenner and Stephen Ashworth and some of the other guys they had, Pop Isaacs. But by McDermott's own admission, McAndrew's added some strength. He's increased his vertical to try to become a little more athletic. So we'll see if he maybe gets down in the post more. Maybe he's got a mid-range game like elbow. Maybe attacks the basket a little bit more this year. So like I said, the one question I have is about rim protection for them and who's gonna deter shots and block shots at the rim. And one name that I saw on the roster is a 7-foot freshman from Serbia, Alexa Dimitrovic. So we'll see if he's actually that next Kalkbrenner. He's a bigger body. In Europe, a lot of times these guys are playing against grown men at 16, 17 years old. So he could be kind of a sneaky, under-the-radar player. And if it's not this year, it would likely be next year. But one thing I love about McDermott, he adds that non-conference schedule. Man, they are at Gonzaga. They go to the Players Era Tournament in Vegas and play Baylor and Iowa State. Then they get Nebraska in an annual game, and then they got K-State, all before the Big East play opens. So Creighton's going to be battle tested, and it's a reason they've been to these 5 straight NCAA tournaments. One other note for those maybe fans of South Dakota or North Dakota, Creighton does play both of them on their schedule in November this year. As I was doing some research, something came up as well. This is super crazy. Creighton has had 2 men's basketball coaches since 1994. Dana Altman and Greg McDermott. 2 coaches in 31 years. Pretty rare in college basketball these days. All right, next we'll talk about Marquette. They were picked to finish 5th in the Big East. Coach Shaka Smart got a lot of continuity and internal development. One of the few programs that you'll find with not a lot of transfers on the roster. So he's built from within. Last year, their big scorer was Cam Jones, who had stuck around. This year, look out for the rising senior Chase Ross. Ross could be this year's version of Cam Jones. 6'5", lefty, averaged 10 points a game, shot 47% from the field. Feels like a breakout season for him. And they're going to need him if they want to compete with the UConn and St. John's juggernauts. They should be good and strong and deep at the guard position. In addition to Ross, they also returned a New Zealander named Ben Gold, 6'11", kind of a stretch four, shot 37% from three. And then guard Sean Jones bolsters that backcourt. He missed last season due to injury. So Shaka has made some comments about shooting the ball in 8 seconds or less, kind of harkening back to the old Phoenix Suns era. But let's watch Marquette. They might be one of the fastest teams in college basketball. They're going to push the pace for sure. Picked to finish fourth this year's Providence. Kim English took over a couple years ago for Ed Cooley. He's looking for his first NCAA tournament berth. His first season was pretty solid. They went to the NIT, but last year really struggled. Went 12-20, 6-14 in the Big East. So the good news for Providence is that they do return 2 players from last year's All Big East freshman team, 6'10" shot blocker Aswin Arunmunse and Ryan Mella. So those 2 coming back. They also pick up a transfer from Vanderbilt, Jason Edwards, who averaged 17 points per game. So that's Edwards is a big get for them. Vandy had a good team. They went to the NCAA tournament. Edwards actually is picked to the second team All Big East preseason. And other guys that got back, point guard Corey Floyd Jr. So they'll have an experienced backcourt, and I think that's why you see Providence in the 4th spot in the preseason poll. They should be pretty solid. I think Kim English needs a bounce back year for his program. But again, this is one thing I love about college basketball. We should know quite a bit about Providence by Thanksgiving. They got Penn State, Wisconsin, Colorado, Virginia Tech all before Thanksgiving. So 4 Power 5 programs all before in the next 4 weeks. The last team is Villanova that we're going to talk about. Now Villanova, they're picked to finish 7th. Historic, blue blood under Jay Wright. They were winning national titles. They've really taken a step back under Neptune the last few years. But Kevin Willard comes over from Maryland, takes over the program, and I think you'll see Villanova return, maybe not quite to the Jay Wright era level, but I think Villanova fans would take a top 5 finish in the Big East this year after where they've been. So they'll have to get some physicality back and get their identity back, because I just felt like Jay Wright had such an identity with their team. They played off 2 feet. They made very limited turnovers. Good guard play. Colin Gillespie, Jalen Brunson. They had some great teams and great players, and they just played, I would say, like the right way, like really unselfish. And the last couple of years, they just didn't, not that they were selfish, they just didn't have as much of an identity. So Kevin Willard will come in, hopefully get Villanova back rocking and rolling. All right, storyline number 3 is the Pitino Bowl. If you haven't heard, Richard Pitino coaching at Xavier after a couple years at New Mexico, Rick Pitino at St. John's. I can't remember a father-son coaching in the same league. Maybe it's happened recently and I'm just missing something, but I've seen some brothers that have coached against each other. I know Rick and Richard have played against each other in the past in non-conference games. But it's really fun to see this. Richard Pitino takes over at Xavier, which is historically a pretty good job. They've had some good teams. They've been to some Sweet 16s. But I think the taking over for Sean Miller also, the program should be in okay shape. This era of transfer portal, there's a little bit of a roster rebuild going on for Pitino. A lot of people listening probably remember Pitino from his time with the Minnesota Gophers, and I always think that was a little bit unfair to him. I think he was put in a tough spot, being he had 1 year of head coaching experience before that. Comes into the Big Ten. They had some good teams. He got to the tournament. He had some good players. He put some guys in the NBA. Amir Coffey. You think of the Jordan Murphy years, Nate Mason. There was some really good teams that he had. But I think he even admits now that he grew up a lot after that. He was too young. He probably wasn't ready. And so now he's in a better place. He's more confident in his coaching ability. He did a great job at New Mexico getting to multiple NCAA tournaments. He had Donovan Dent. He had the big guy Toppin, who's at Texas Tech now. So he recruited those guys at New Mexico. And New Mexico is a great place to coach. Great environment at the pit. So anyway, I'm always rooting for Richard Pitino. I think it's going to be tough this year going against his dad in that St. John's outfit. But one thing that is great about college basketball is you get some of these rivalry games, and the Cincinnati Xavier rivalry game called the Crosstown Shootout is one of the best. So watch for that early in the year, Cincinnati Xavier and the Crosstown Shootout. All right, lastly, the dark horse pick in this installment of the Big East Conference Preview. I'm going with the Georgetown Hoyas. Ed Cooley is entering his third year in the nation's capital. They were picked to finish 6th in the preseason poll. They went from 9 wins his first year to 18 his second. They went from 2 wins in the Big East to 8 last year. I think Ed Cooley is on the up and up. I think they are ascending. He brought in junior guard KJ Lewis from Arizona. Loved KJ Lewis at Arizona. That's a massive boost. He's preseason all Big East second team, brings a physical defensive toughness to that team, which Ed Cooley is all about. And the other that they bring in is returning guard Malik Mack. So they have a little bit of experience in the backcourt. And those two, I think, are really going to fit what Ed Cooley wants to do. I really think Georgetown plays spoiler. I can see them making an NCAA tournament here this year. I think they might even leapfrog a Marquette or a Providence. I think they're that good. One thing I did notice is I think Ed Cooley agrees, and he sees some level of ability with this team, or has some confidence in this team, because they play a true road game at Kentucky. They get the inner city game against Maryland just across the way, and then they also play North Carolina. A win in any one of those would be huge. I'd say if you win one of those games and you're above 500 in the Big East, you're probably in the tournament. If you win 2, you're looking at a top 8 seed in the NCAA tournament. So I've always rooted for Ed Cooley. I loved him at Providence. I know he's from Providence. It was tough for him to leave. Georgetown kind of has this historical nature to the job. Totally get why he left. But so I'm rooting for him, and I think this year the Hoyas make another move up. They go for maybe 8-12. Maybe they're 11-9 this year in the Big East, and that might be good enough to get them in the NCAA tournament. All right, that's the 3 storylines and my dark horse pick for the Big East Conference. We are rolling through the conferences now. I think that might be the last major conference of the year. And next, I'm going to do my mid-major, which you can expect to see some Gonzaga. You can expect to see some San Diego State. And we might sprinkle in a little bit of St. Thomas talk in that one as well. So thanks a lot for listening. This has been the Splash City Basketball Podcast.
Back in that bag again.